Meeting is being broadcast live via Zoom. It is also recorded for playback video on demand viewing at hwcam.org.
Good.
All right, so public input, 10 minutes is reserved for public input. Each person is limited to 2 minutes. Total time for public comment is limited to 10 minutes. All participants wishing to address the Select Board during public comments may do so in person or via Zoom by virtually raising their hand. Speakers must identify themselves by name and street address. The Select Board may not deliberate or vote on matters discussed during public comment but are not on the agenda.
See.
But I didn't see it on the agenda, so if it's not on the agenda tonight, we'll leave, but.
Actually, go ahead.
But I just wanted to make sure if you were going to discuss it or not.
So I sent that to Margaret Hoffman and Ann Weeks and Dan Pasquarello, because that's really more of a planning board.
Oh, gotcha, okay.
So we have a planning board meeting probably in 2 weeks or 3
Okay.
weeks, and we'll
Okay.
take it up there.
Okay, at a
But
planning
It
board.
was interesting, yeah.
Oh, okay, all right, great.
Could I just say something too, because I have a bit of a mea culpa on that front, because at the last select board meeting, I volunteered to participate in a drafting with, among others, Margaret and Dan Pasquarello, and I simply didn't have time to really spend on it. And now we have the MBTA Communities Forum tomorrow night, where I think a lot of those issues will be discussed. As Peter said, the planning board will be meeting as well, though I'm still happy to and planning to participate in whatever written answers to your questions. And I saw that you also sent an email the other day about a House bill that is pending. So it's partially my fault that we don't have anything to present tonight, but as someone who has some familiarity with that statute, I do still hope to be able to contribute to the answers.
Yeah, that's great, yeah.
I'm sorry, your name?
Courtney
Courtney,
Ashwood.
oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Courtney.
I know. You guys are probably all like, oh.
So the MBTA Community Forum is at Bucher, 6 p.m. tomorrow night.
Okay. Yes,
And you're going to
plan
have a lot of
attend.
people there, because it's going to be the Select Board and the Planning Board.
Right.
Yeah, we definitely plan to attend tomorrow night, so appreciate it. Thank you.
Great.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I think we're,
Just 1 minute. Any other hands? Nope. No more hands.
it's up to you. You're on,
All
buddy.
right, I'm on. All right, so I think the big news tonight is Catherine Tinsley has agreed to return as the Select Board's recording secretary, and
Oh, thank God.
she is here with us tonight. She'll be doing it remotely. She's up in Maine, but Catherine, if you want to say hi, I'm sure the board would like to hear from you.
Good evening. Nice to be back.
Great to have
Hi,
you back.
Great to
Catherine.
have you back.
Welcome back.
Nobody does it better.
I don't think my camera's engaging, but I'm here.
There you are.
There it is. Evening.
Hi there.
Oh, there you are.
There you are.
Yeah. Oh, there you are twice.
Oh, there it is.
It's great to see you again, too. My next door neighbor, as of about 3 months ago. So good to see you again.
Thank you. You as well.
Welcome back, Catherine.
Welcome back.
Great to have you.
Yeah, thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
All right. And apart from that, so the EPA, Gary actually forwarded this some time ago to my attention, but the EPA issued a nationwide warning that cyber attacks to water facilities have been increasing significantly in both frequency and severity across the country. From what we can tell, they're primarily cyber-based through cloud-operated SCADA systems or vulnerabilities to the network. And ours is wireless and is not operated through any networked system or cloud-based operating software. So we are, say completely safe, but we are, we are safe, have looked into that and are safe from at least the cyber attack side of things.
Thank you, Ernest Ashley.
Yeah, Ernest and Eric.
Eric. Eric with a K.
And then, the question that the board brought up was either last meeting or the meeting before we got some clarification. Jeff Soulard got an opinion from the Department of Revenue as far as when the allowable transfer date for CPA funds, and it is July 1 of the start of fiscal year 25. I know there was some back and forth as to if it could be released immediately after town meeting, and in their interpretation, that project should not start nor funds be transferred until the start of the new fiscal year. And that's all I have for you tonight.
Well, I'll start off with the thank yous from a very busy past week. So back a week ago Sunday, before Memorial Day, the Hamilton American Legion, as always, hosts the breakfast for veterans. And I'd like to say a shout out, thank you to the Hamilton American Legion and the staff there that provided the usual great breakfast, and also great speeches, especially from Senator Bruce Tarr that attended as well. Next event was...
In no particular order, we had a extremely successful Pride flag raising yesterday by the town. It was well attended, and we had some great speakers from Salem, as well as a blessing from the First Church, so that was great to see. To piggyback off of that, as a reminder, we have the Pride Picnic, which is being held at the Patton Homestead on Sunday. I believe it's from 12 to 4. I am going to give a biased plug. We have a little Girl Scouts tent there, so all are welcome to come by. But as well as we have Flag Day actually coming up, which is being sponsored by the Scouts as well as the Fire Department on 6/14. So that is a date to be on the lookout for.
I'd like to take the chance to thank the Hamilton Wenham School District, and specifically Eric Tracy's office, for extending invitations to each of us, among other elected officials, to sit in very nice seating at the graduation this past Saturday. And proud to say that all 5 of us on the board attended the Hamilton Wenham High School graduation, which was very well done and an exciting time, obviously, for everybody involved. And congratulations to all of the graduates, including one, I believe, who's here in the room helping with HWCAM, and his colleague who has been helping with HWCAM for the last year or so.
Yeah, and I echo what Ben said. It was a spectacular graduation, and also the candlelight ceremony a couple days prior that we were also invited to. So we very much appreciate those invitations. And I just would like to particularly congratulate the valedictorian, Bella Fazio, who really gave a stunning speech. Was just really amazing to watch. A lot of great speeches, but hers was a particular standout. Congratulations to Matt Bailey, who was celebrated this past week also for his, I think, 11 or 13 years leading the Boy Scouts and the Cub Scouts in town. He's given so much, and it was wonderful to be there and to see the appreciation and the thanks and really celebrate him, which that took place at First Church. And I'd also like to mention that the kids at the community house in Hamilton Wenham are busy preparing for opening night on Thursday night for Anastasia. So I encourage everybody to get tickets and go out and support the kids. There are at least 2 Wenham residents, Cecilia Crockett and Robbie Capel, who are in lead roles. So come down and see them and really support the kids.
And we need to circle back to Memorial Day, too. So thank you to the Veterans Committee, and especially the fire and police departments that turned out in the full dress. And to, I say, what, probably 200 citizens that turned up at the memorial. So it was not the best weather, but good weather. And I think it was a very excellent program, both at the memorial and after the parade down at the Main Street Cemetery. So thanks to all, and especially to the Veterans Committee.
It's a great week.
Yes, busy.
And then I would just like to tell you folks that the construction of the new turf field started yesterday. Went out, checked it out, big front-end loader ripping up the track. And that hopefully will be completed by July 2025, but maybe sneaking it a couple months early if the weather's not too bad in the fall.
Excellent.
All right.
All right. So moving on, new business. The first agenda item is any discussion, vote to approve the 13th annual Coast to Cure bike ride, benefiting neurofibrosis Northeast. Something the board does every year. So it is before you again this year.
Any questions?
It looks like we have a representative actually tonight. If you'd like to say anything?
Nice.
No, I just want to say this is our 13th year, and we appreciate the approval every year. Just as a reminder of the streets, it's Essex Street, Grapevine Road, Larch Row, and Walnut Road.
We have a map we can share here quickly.
Thank you.
As somebody who has not only participated in this event for several years, but have close ties to patients with neurofibromatosis, it is extremely important in our family to be able to support this.
And can we state the time so that people can come out and cheer on the riders?
It starts at 7 to 8. Well, it depends on the route. There's 3 different options. You can do the 24, 40, or 60, 66. And for Hamilton, for Wenham, it's around, it's the 40 and 66 mile routes. So I would say, it's hard to say, predict, but they would start probably around 7, 8. So probably 10 or 11 o'clock. We'll start, some of the riders will start coming through.
There are some of us that are a little slower than others, so it takes a little longer sometimes.
You know, the nice thing is that part of Walnut and that part of
Brand new.
brand new. Thank you, Rich.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Make it for easy riding.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for participating.
Motion.
Thank you.
Move to
Go ahead.
Move to approve the 13th annual Coast to the Cure bike ride benefiting neurofibromatosis Northeast.
Second.
Discussion? All right. You ready to vote? Peter says yes.
Deirdre, yes?
Ben, excuse me, Ben, yes.
Karen, yes.
Gary, yes.
All right.
Sure, I
Excellent.
said that wrong. So I'm pretty sure I've said that wrong.
Oh, we knew what you meant.
Neurofibromatosis, they call it NF.
All right.
I know.
NF is easy.
No, it's
I
like
think it said meiosis instead of
neurofibromatosis.
mitosis. Yeah, all right. I'm not going to try. NF.
Yeah, NF, yep.
All right, B, all right, so moving on, B is they removed their application, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so that is Vin Fromage. They were looking to have an event on the parcel that surrounds them, but is held by a different name. And they have decided to pursue a different direction to host the event, like as far as, I believe, a catering license. So we may be getting more information, but they're removing their one-day liquor license application from the board at this time. And C is discussion and potential vote to adopt the updated job descriptions. So I circulated these probably 2 weeks ago, updated again with some some corrections and formatting. And I just want to, first thank Joe. He did most of the heavy lifting on these, and it's really more, I just want to point out, it's more than just drafting a job description. So we had 2 years ago when I started, what was already underway was a compensation and classification study done by the HR consultants, GovHR. I believe they're out of Delaware. And what they did was, I felt like they did a pretty good job on the classification piece. However, the compensation piece was, something to be desired. So we've kind of filled in the holes since then. But what it really highlighted was the fact that our job descriptions did not match, what our folks were actually doing. And not just like what you're doing on the day-to-day, but as far as like an internal equity structure, what experience like was required for that type of job, what type of education and licenses were required for that type of job, what are the required skill sets, what are the working conditions, what are the hours. So like all these things that kind of play into your compensation and the internal equity structure were missing entirely. And we did get a framework from the GovHR, that a tool that Joe has used to essentially, test each job description and update them with the appropriate experience levels based on like their level of responsibility and role in the organization. So I think that this is a really good step. The next batch will be on Monday, and that will finalize all the non-union job descriptions for the town. So we have a nice clean slate that are all, it's got fair and equitable compensation with a defendable framework for how we, come up with our compensation ranges. So kudos to Joe.
Thank you.
Yeah, they were very well done.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
If she says it's really well done, that's saying something. So, discussion? Shall we move? I move to adopt updated job descriptions for treasurer/collector, town planner, director of land use, finance director, DPW director, conservation commissioner.
Second.
Discussion? All right. Let's vote. Peter says yes.
Deirdre, yes?
Ben, yes.
Karen, yes.
Gary, yes.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And next is Jeff Soulard. This was our first in a long time investment management performance update. This is something we strive to do quarterly, I believe, is in our investment management statement. But, with the turnover in finance, and everyone's kind of getting back on their feet, this will be the first of hopefully many to come.
All right.
Mr. Soulard.
Now, and you said to just keep this under 2 hours?
Yeah, thereabouts, 2 plus or minus an hour.
So,
We did do this like 2 or 3 years ago, and it was very long.
Yes.
So
we'll
thank
try
you,
to keep
Jeff.
it to 10 minutes or so for you. Basically, we have 2 major investment accounts. We have an OPEB trust account with Bartholomew Investments, and we also have a trust fund account, which actually is one account, but it actually commingles about 75 or 80 underlying trust accounts. So I'm just going to kind of go through each one, very quickly, give you a little bit of detail on what the accounts are, and then some of the performance info. So the OPEB trust, basically, the town has a liability out there of about $4.2 million for other post-employment benefits, which are essentially health insurance, dental insurance, that kind of thing. Several years ago, I think back in FY19, it looks like the town adopted this policy of we put $40,000 in the operating budget to fund OPEB, and the plan at the time was each year we'd add 10,000 to that. So we went 40, then 50. Most recently, we've contributed $90,000 for FY24. We have $100,000 in the budget, operating budget for FY25. And as you may recall, the Finance Committee voted to allocate some additional free cash into the OPEB account this year, which will be another $300,000. So we are looking at having, like a $400,000 contribution FY25. That's going to put us somewhere over the sort of 15% range of funding of the OPEB liability of about $4.2 million, which puts us in pretty good position compared to a lot of towns. But there are, several towns. I think Dover, for instance, is 100% financed or funded. Essex is about 50. So it's all over the map. But this, puts us on a good path to funding. And when we fully fund our pension liability in about 2036, I think the town can then begin to address fully funding the OPEB when the big pension payments drop off. So we have a trust fund under Mass General Law, Chapter 32B, Section 20. And in that document, what we've done is the town has elected to have the treasurer as the trustee of this investment account. This is pretty common across the state. Most towns have opted to have the treasurer be the trustee, partnered with a professional investment manager. This is, opposed to having sort of a trustee by committee, so you have some select board members, some finance committee members, things like that on a committee to make decisions. And that becomes problematic because people come and go from the boards. People have different biases. You could have a hedge fund manager on the FinCom, and then you could have a bond manager on the FinCom. So most folks have adopted, having the treasurer and then just supplementing their skills with a professional manager. We use a company called Bartholomew and Company. They are sort of the premier municipal money manager in the state. They probably manage over half the communities in the state, their investment portfolios. And the reason that it's important to use a firm like them, if you just went to a manager at Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan or something, they don't have that specialized niche knowledge about what the state requirements are for investing municipal money. And so they bring that knowledge to make sure that we don't run afoul of the various state statutes. So they're managing for us, and so they've helped us create an investment policy statement, which I believe you did go over in detail at some point in the last year or so. And that policy sets forth that this investment should be about 55% equities, about 25% bonds or fixed income, and then 20% in what we call alternatives. So think of things like hedge funds, private equity, real estate, those type of things. And so that's our target. And within the investment policy statement, you also have sort of bandwidth, so minimums and maximums for each asset class. And the reason for that is that it's twofold. One, as the portfolio grows throughout the year, your equities might be performing really well, and so they've grown to more than 55% of your total assets. So it gives you some wiggle room. And then second, it provides your your professional money manager some leeway to use their professional judgment to make tactical decisions. So if they feel like it's a good time to move into equities or out of equities, it gives them that leeway. But right now, we're at basically 58% equity, 25% bonds, and 17% in alternatives. So pretty close to that, that target allocation. So that's just to give you a little background on the account and all that. And then you'll see up on the screen there's a table there. And you can see we started the year with 440,000 or so. We made a contribution of 90,000. We've had some growth, the gross growth in the portfolio, which includes capital appreciation and income, so interest, dividends, that type of thing. We've grown 58,000. We've paid investment fees of just under 18,000, and so that brings us to the end of the year. We're just under $587,000. That's through 11 months of the fiscal year from last July to this May 31st. That works out to investment performance of about 9.98% over that time frame. So then, how do we measure that? How do we sort of see how we're doing comparatively? And so what Bartholomew does is they create what we call a custom benchmark. And they say if you're going to be in this 55, 25, 20 allocation, we need to go to underlying indexes and build a custom benchmark. So what they do is they go, and to mimic the equities, they go to what's called the MSCI All World Index, which covers all equity across all global equity markets. 25% is the Bloomberg US Universal Bond Index that captures the bonds, And then the final one is the HFRX Global Hedge Fund, which is meant to be the index that tracks sort of our alternatives, our private equity, our hedge funds, et cetera. And if we look at that portfolio, you can see, well, the benchmark came in at 10.51%. So the benchmark actually kind of outperformed what our portfolio did. And the one thing I would say to you is that we pay a management fee to Bartholomew. And based on the level of assets we have, we pay, it's 0.35% of assets is our fee. So really, the gross performance on our portfolio was really closer to 10.33%, but we gave away 0.35% or $1,757 in fees. So gross of fees, we're pretty close to the benchmark. And you might hear people say, well, geez, there's a concept of passive investing. Why don't I just put it in a Vanguard mutual fund, or why don't I, just do ETFs or something? But you'd still need to determine what ETFs you're going to put it in, or what allocation, how much international, how much US, whatever. So that's where, to manage a portfolio of this size and to manage it under the rules provided to us by the state, you clearly want to be paying to have that professional, sort of help here. So, obviously we want to be beating benchmarks where we can, but, given that we're, tracking fairly close, gross of fees, it's not anything I have a concern about. It's, we're always going to be monitoring it. And the other thing I would say about that is that really, it probably wasn't until Belinda got here as a full-time treasurer that, we kind of started to more actively manage this portfolio. So we're still a little bit in the process of sort of building this portfolio. So it's not fully built out yet. And like an example I'll give you is that, we're at 17% of alternatives. We want to be at 20. And part of it is that we were held off from investing in certain alternatives, which are more restrictive, because we either A, didn't have enough assets in the portfolio to qualify, or B, they just didn't have enough products available that we would qualify for. But they do have new products that are rolling on soon that will help us fill in that other 3% gap and get us to our sort of full asset allocation. So that's as quick a run through as I can give you on the OPEB. I don't know if anybody has any questions now before we move on to the trust fund, or if you want to just move on.
I'm fine.
I just have a quick question out of curiosity. So you mentioned the other towns, like Dover, that's funded at 100%.
Yeah.
Like, how did they do that?
Have you ever been in Dover?
Yeah.
Not really.
They're all millionaires.
Flush with cash.
It's a town.
They just have that much free cash?
I mean, they're just.
They're all millionaires.
An appetite in a town like Dover or Weston, that when they need overrides, they pass them, and things like that, which leads to having more free cash, because a lot of communities are forced to try to squeak across the line and fund their budgets, and not sort of continue to build free cash in a year like that. The Westons and the Dovers of the world are just in a very fortunate place, and they're very fortunate. Like Dover has one of the best, I don't know if he's still there, but they had one of the best treasurers in the state. He trained everybody, and he was really good and really proactive, and he realized they had the resources, and he got ahead of it, and he got them funded early. And I think they were 100% funded 5-6 years ago.
Wow.
I think the last time I looked, they were like 110% funded. It's crazy.
Well, Weston in general has the Boston Post Road, so the commercial activity that they have along that between the pharmaceutical companies and the commercial business alone, that'll be able to offset a lot of that. Right from Waltham all the way into Weston Center.
Yeah, I mean, especially if they have a split tax rate and things like that, it would help for sure. But
what about Essex, though?
Essex just was able to do it because we made a conscious decision to fund it with unusual cash flows. So when they filmed the movie Grown Ups in Essex, we got a huge payout from the movie, and we put 50% of it into OPEB. And then when we sold Canomo Point and did things like that, we made a conscious decision to put money into OPEB. When we had free cash, we put it into OPEB. I always advocated for it because the one thing about OPEB is it's one of the things that actually can pay you back. So once your OPEB is fully, so right now we're in what you would call a pay-as-you-go system. So, just to pull a number, let's say it costs $200,000 a year for health and dental insurance for the town share of the retirees. Well, when OPEB is fully funded, that 200 can actually come out of OPEB. And that's 200 that doesn't have to come out of your operating budget. So putting money into OPEB, it's powerful for two reasons. One, you're putting it into a vehicle that is able to be invested in a much more sort of aggressive way, versus if you put money into stabilization funds, which we'll talk about on the sort of the next page, you're much more restricted in what you can invest in. So a stabilization fund might be able to grow, up to 5% a year, but an OPEB fund could grow 25% in a good year. So it's very powerful to put money in there. And then the fact that when you get to the end, it removes a large expense from your, from your annual financial. It's a great place to store money.
Okay.
So, I think, as I say, once we finish fully funding the pension with the Essex Regional Retirement Board, that would be that is essentially $1 million payment in our budget. That if that dropped off, it's a $4.2 million liability. If we were suddenly able to throw $500,000 a year, you would knock that 4.2 down very, very quickly. So.
Okay, thank you. That's
Sure.
helpful.
Jeff, thanks. I realize you may not have these statistics at your fingertips, but it would be interesting to know whether past fiscal years have met or exceeded the benchmark performance, and also whether the portfolio mix for those years is the same as what Bartholomew seems to recommend statewide and is set out there.
I can't speak too much to the mix because the investment policy statement is like the one that we're working off right now was signed last June. So I don't have the full history of what those prior investment policy statements were. Right. But I can tell you that if I look at sort of portfolio since inception, which is I think back to like 2017, our portfolio, our OPEB portfolio has gone up. It's up 5.46%. Annualized return. That's what we've averaged annually. Over that same time, the benchmark that I'm showing you here, that's up 5.71%. So we're tracking fairly close to that. And I would say there's an issue there with we certainly weren't fully implemented in this type of investment allocation all the way back to 2017. So I would expect that there was heavier cash positions earlier on, so that would mute the since inception return.
Right. Plus fees.
What's that?
Plus fees.
Yeah, and then the fees. Yeah, and honestly, so I mean, we pay 0.35% is the fee we pay Bartholomew, and interestingly enough, with the contributions that we're making to the stabilization fund and OPEB on July 1st that we approved at town meeting, that will put us over $10 million at Bartholomew, which will actually reduce our fee from 0.35% to 0.3%, which, for any of you who have investment management portfolios with folks, most of my old high net worth clients were paying, anywhere from, 0.6% to 1%, for investment management. So 0.3 to 0.35% is a pretty reasonable fee, all things considered for, someone who's a specialty manager, in our little niche world.
Great.
So.
Gary?
Part of the answer is up to the time we got the investment policy finally implemented, and previous boards had essentially put all the money under the one account, which was restricted to the most conservative setup, so that it was only with the new investment, with the alternates, that we're really starting to see improved performance.
Yeah, and just to follow on to that, the importance of having a more diversified asset allocation is, it gets a lot into the concept of correlation. So when, when one market, when bonds are up, equities are down, or vice versa, as you have more money and you have a more evolved investment policy statement, you're built to to absorb, the ebbs and flows of a market a lot better. So yeah, I feel like we're in a good position, and we've made a, getting over the 15% funded threshold is a big thing. I think we have a good investment policy statement. We're going to be getting some new investments shortly in the alternative space. So yeah, I mean, I think, all in all, I think we should all be pretty happy where we are with OPEB, and, I think within 10 to 12 years where we'll be with OPEB in terms of, just having more money available once the pension is funded. You want to switch to the next page, and we'll talk a little bit about the trust funds. Trust funds are a little more know if confusing is the right word, but so we have one big trust fund account, and that trust fund account has our stabilization, it has our community preservation money, and then it has our cemetery money, the town's cemetery money, like perpetual care, sale of lots, that type of thing. But then it also has all of these sort of donated funds for flower funds and different things that all these folks have donated to the town, which, like I say, makes up 75 or 80 accounts in total. So these all get invested under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 54. And so the idea behind the general law is the state is really invested in making sure that they're protecting things. They're all about safety. So the treasurers are conditioned and beat over the head with safety, liquidity, and yield. They're constantly told it's protection, the liquidity being available, and then yield is your last, sort of concern. But the thing is that, from sort of an investment professional's, kind of standpoint, the state approach to protection or a protecting principle is maybe a little bit backwards. So they are far more focused on making sure that if you put $1 in, you don't go to 98 cents. But by focusing on protecting it that way, the unintended consequence of that is that you might still have the dollar under their guidelines, but unfortunately that dollar has a purchasing power of 79 cents. So, I don't know if it's penny wise, pound foolish or what, but it's not, from an investment standpoint, most of us don't love it. I understand the intent, and I think, historically, maybe folks in treasurer offices years ago weren't investment savvy or whatever, so the state tried to force down laws that would, protect town assets. But essentially what this is they basically want you to only invest in bonds, or money markets. And then they said, you can put some money in equities, but it can only be in what we call the legal list. And the legal list, I think, used to be 30 or so stocks, but the legal list is now 22 stocks that you can invest in. And the trouble is that of the 22 stocks, 4 of them might be pharmaceutical companies, and 5 of them might be financial institutions. So one of the problems that you have if you invest in the entire list is that you're overweighted to sectors. So if there was an issue in the banking industry and you just invest in the legal list, you might have a big exposure to a bad sector. And more folks, treasurers and the Treasurers Association have kind of complained about this. And for many years now, there's been a push to move to what's called the prudent investor rule, which is used in the estate and trust world. So that if you're a trustee of a trust and you follow the prudent investor rule, essentially you can't be sued, because essentially what it means is you did what another informed investor would have done in the same situation. So, to use like the extreme example, if you're a trustee of a trust, you don't just take every penny and say, I got a good feeling about this Bitcoin. You invest in a pool of well-allocated, diversified securities and stocks and bonds and whatever. And then that it protects you under the prudent investor rule. It just became final a little while ago, like within the last year. But until then, we were stuck with this setup with the legal list. And so what most communities did with their trust funds is they would put, say, 10 or 20% in the equities in the legal list, and then they would put everything else into bonds. And the idea, the Commonwealth's idea behind it would be, if you only invested in bonds and you had this little pocket of what the state perceived as safe stocks, that would allow you to outpace a money market account, and with very limited risk in their eyes. And so what we'll see is that that's somewhat true. But we'll see on the next page where we would love to move to this prudent investor rule, which will help us. But in any event, what we have, that's a backstory to sort of what these trust funds are. So we started the year, you can look in the table there, just under, $8 million essentially. We had some small contributions. We had gross income and growth of, $369,000. Obviously, the fees, even at 0.35%, are much larger here because you're dealing with a much larger pool of money. So that reduces things by $28,000, and we end the year at just over $8.3 million. So at a high level, we think we did, that growth over the 11 months of fiscal year 24 is about 4.26%. And so now we go down below and we look at sort of benchmarks. And so we don't actually have a custom benchmark for the trust funds. But what we have here are three sort of indexes we can use to sort of, take the temperature, if you will. So if we look at the top one there, the Bloomberg U.S. government credit, the 1 to 3 year index, that's a way to measure just sort of like, well, how did our bond portfolio do? How did bonds do? And that's at 4.28%. So we're tracking that fairly closely. If you look at the next one, the Bloomberg 1 to 3 month U.S. Treasury bills, that one's actually up over 5%. And that what the U.S. T-bill index is meant to do is it's meant to mimic money market funds. And if anybody is following interest rates are up. Whether you're paying a mortgage or a car loan, or you're collecting interest at your local bank. So right now money markets are actually outpacing actual bonds. So at a high level, if we look at that, we say, oh, we're kind of trailing. We could just be in a money market fund and we'd be doing considerably better. Be 0.8% higher or whatever. And then if we look at the final thing we look at, which kind of gets back to what I was saying about the state's idea, if we look at the consumer price index, inflation over the last 11 months, that's coming in at 3.27%. So to some degree, this proves the state's point. You sort of put in a little bit of equity into this bond portfolio, and so instead of earning 3.27% and tracking inflation, you've managed to make an extra 1%. So that's how this kind of looks at a high level. But now it's going to get a little bit more complicated on the next page. But I'm going to try to explain why the 4.26% isn't really our real return here. So if you want to flip to the next one. So in this bond portfolio, we actively manage our bonds, so we're really buying bonds. Unlike in our OPEB account where we're buying like bond index funds or bond ETFs. In this portfolio, we're actually buying a $500,000, Weston general obligation bond or something. So in this interest rate environment, which was a rising interest rate environment, and now it's probably sort of like a leveled off interest rate environment. What happens pretty frequently as we build our portfolio is that we're buying a bond. We go out and say, an old bond matured, we have to redeploy $500,000, and we go out to buy a bond. Well, we might be buying a bond. This isn't a new bond. It's out there in the marketplace. Well, that bond might be a few years old, so the bond might only be paying 2% interest. So, let's just say, like I sort of made an example up here, to use $1,000 as an example. But, if you had a $1,000 bond with the face value of $1,000 and it was paying 2%, you would say, well, why would I possibly do that? So what you do is the person selling it says, okay, obviously it's only paying you 2% interest. Why would you do that? What if I sold you this $1,000 bond for $975? So now I'm going to get my 2% interest payments. But when the bond matures, I'm going to get $1,000 even though I only paid $975 for it. And so that becomes your total return on the bond. So you don't really just make, $200 in interest payments. You make $200 in interest payments plus $25. And so this is the concept of buying bonds at a discount. And so what this creates is a concept called yield to maturity. And so what you pay for a bond and what you receive in interest payments, at the end of the day, that determines what your true yield to maturity is. And that's your real total return. So right now, the number you looked at on the other page said we made 4.26%. But the fair market value on May 31st doesn't capture all that sort of excess we have on these bonds. So right now, our portfolio, the maturity value of all the bonds is $400,000 higher than the present value, the fair market value of those bonds right now, which is how we track performance, because you're only looking at what's the fair market value today, what have you grown to. So we have sort of, there's a hidden $400,000 worth of extra earnings as each of these bonds hit maturity. And now that's not at this specific date, we get $400,000, we have what's referred to as a laddered bond portfolio. So a laddered bond portfolio just simply means you have a portfolio of different maturities. So, you don't just have, all our bonds mature in 10 years. It's, you've got them maturing, almost monthly or every other month or whatever. And that's important because the bond market moves, and you want to be able to get into the market in sort of like a dollar cost averaging kind of way. If you've got an older bond that isn't paying a great interest rate, it's going to be maturing soon, and you'll get to re-enter the market and buy it something that's more favorable to you. So I can't totally quantify this to you, but if you looked on the other page, our growth was about $400,000 on the table we had. That's how we arrived at 4.26% growth in the portfolio. We basically have double that in what we'll receive when all these things mature. So our true sort of return is going to be north of 4.26% once all of that sort of happens. And so, it's not as simple as saying, well, that it's double, so our return's really 8 point something, but it's something more than that. Where it exactly lies, I'm not sure, but I think it's an important point to bring up, because I think plenty of people could look at that other table and say, why wouldn't you just be in a money market fund? It's much easier. But to sort of get back to a question that Ben asked, if we looked at historical performance, by being in this type of a more diversified investment of bonds and a little bit of stock, and over time, we've outperformed the index for the T-bills. Our portfolio since inception is up 1.79% net of fees. But the U.S. T-bill index is 1.41. So, we're, whatever, 0.3% more than if we had just been in money markets all this time. So, that's why you don't, just make the jump and go to just a money market. And this point too, if we've got $400,000 that we're going to get at maturity, you wouldn't want to just sell everything and go to money markets, because you'd be leaving $400,000 on the table, because the trading price of the bond today does not reflect what the ultimate maturity would be. So this part I know is a little bit, I've gone through it quicker and it's a little bit more convoluted. So if anybody has questions on that, I'm happy to entertain those. And then I just have another small point about this prudent investment thing, which we've kind of covered a little bit.
Good job.
All right. And so the final point on the prudent investment thing is, this is really new. I think only a handful of communities voted on this in town meetings in April and May this year. We are taking kind of a wait and see approach. We're sort of like, let's see what these communities, they implement it. Let's see what the pitfalls are, what works, what doesn't work. And then let's move towards implementing this, sooner rather than later. So I think, I'd have to talk with Belinda more, but I think, we'd probably like to see an article on town meeting in April 25 to, for the town to adopt, and, these prudent investor rule provisions to just give us more flexibility. And the other part of that is that the prudent investor rules would only apply, or they wouldn't apply, I guess is the easier way to say it, they wouldn't apply to stabilization funds, and they wouldn't apply to the CPA funds. They would only apply to the cemetery funds and all of those things. The idea being, the state would prefer, if you think about stabilization, when do you need stabilization? When times are tough. And so if you were to put stabilization money into, equities and things like that, typically you need stabilization when times are tougher. So you wouldn't want to run into a situation where you needed stabilization money and you're like, oh God, GE is down and this is down. I'm buying, I have to sell this stuff at a loss because I need stabilization money right now. Or CPA money, same thing. Like, you wouldn't need money to fund a project and say, geez, we really want, if we could hang on a little longer, the stocks might bounce back or whatever. So what I think we would do once we adopt this prudent investor rule would be that we would actually split the accounts at Bartholomew. So you would move CPA and stabilization funds to one account. You would take all the other trust funds for the cemetery and related library, that type of stuff, and put that into another account that would follow the prudent investor rule. You would move all the CPA and stabilization money to be continue under the old, what they call like the legal list rules. And there's, we don't have a choice in that. And it does sort of make sense because, most trust funds are long-term money. Stabilization could be, as soon as your next town meeting that you need it. So that's all I have. We'll see you in 6 months or whatever. But yeah, any other questions or?
That was really well done.
All right, well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
I had just a couple of questions, and I'll try to keep them short because I know we've spent some time on it. And they're not directly on point to the two topics that you addressed, Jeff, for trust funds, but I just want to better understand the nature of those funds. And some of these questions are kind of simple, but I'm going to ask them anyway, just so that I can have a clearer understanding. So there's you said approximately 90 trust funds that are in this category.
Yep.
Okay. And they're all privately endowed trust funds with the town or some town entity.
I would say, there's 75 to 80. The CPA and the stabilization make up 2 of them.
Okay.
Then we probably have we probably have 5 or 6 actual town trust funds.
Okay.
And then the remainder, there's
Are
probably
private.
70, the
Okay.
Perkins Family Flower Fund and
Right.
that type of thing.
Right. Okay. So it's probably not the case then that all of the funds in this category are only either having the money spent down based on different, grants and payments for flowers and that sort of thing, or having the balance increase based on investments. It sounds like CPA, for example, there's obviously incoming revenue that increases the funds. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say so. Gary might be able to speak better to sort of on the trust fund, like on the donated trust funds, like what portion of that is sort of an ongoing, maybe, there's certain families that are like, they give a certain amount every year to the fund versus my sense is there's several that are, they've been around for 47 years.
Right.
Yeah, so if I can chime in.
I know you're kind of.
So they range from a $100 trust fund that was set up 70 years ago, and clearly the $1 in interest doesn't pay for the carnation once a year, up to the larger, the cemetery perpetual care is, what, 200,000 or 300,000?
Yeah.
And then you have, of course, the stabilization fund, and then CPA, which, skyrockets in amounts above that.
Right.
But almost all of them are fixed amounts for the small ones
Okay.
that were one-time donations. Sometimes they have specific terms on them for
Right.
purposes, and of course, flowers are flowers, but there's others, like, the Veterans
Right.
Monument and so
Right.
forth.
Yeah, looking at it, the cemetery perpetual care, and this is my March 31st numbers, but, that's 300. The Perkins Cemetery perpetual care is 162,000. The Perkins War Memorial is 98,000. And then there are, 25 funds that are $1,200 or less. Then on the library side, we've got, a 15,000, a 68,000, a 77,000, and then below that, there's really, there's another one for 154 actually, but other than that, those are a little bigger. Those tend to be, $3, $4, $5, up to $10,000 for these different grants, trust funds, but so definitely not like the funds above where, like Gary says, there's some, $200 funds. We've got some charity funds. Really the biggest one there is about a $40,000. The Ralph Smith Charity Fund is about $40,000. The rest are, under $5. Then we just have some miscellaneous funds. It's really, there, I guess the big one there would be the conservation. No, even the conservation right now is 66,000. Obviously, it's going to be much bigger shortly. And stabilization's the big one there, over 600,000. But yeah, of all those accounts we have, Wenham Affordable Housing's got, $850,000 in it or so. But yeah, it's an awful, I was sort of shocked when I got here, when I looked at this
Right.
report and went, how many
Right.
trust funds do we
Right.
have? And then, it's literally, 12 funds make up $7.8 million, and then another 70 funds make up, 10,000 or
Right.
200,000 or something.
So these questions come up from time to time at the Veterans Committee as it relates to the half a dozen, I think, or so veterans-related funds, many of which are small funds. And so it's not for today, but I think some of the questions that I have, just based on those conversations, and it applies, I think, to all of the, let's call them privately endowed trust funds, many of which are smaller, given that they are all part of one fund that's managed by Bartholomew. I think I'd be interested to sit down at some point with Gary or you and understand who has primary responsibility for accounting for each of the amounts of money incoming, outgoing, for each of the individual funds that are within the Bartholomew Fund. I'm assuming Bartholomew
Yeah,
does,
so it's
but-
one of the services
Right.
they provide.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, we have one fund, and then they actually produce, it's basically, I would refer to it as a sub-account report. And so they take that one thing,
Right.
that one account, and they turn it into 3 pages of different
Right.
funds. I know, it's on at some point, Wynn Dodge and I are going to get together, and I think one other person
Yes.
to kind of walk through this.
Right.
The way our reporting works, and we use an accounting software called SoftWrite, it's very convoluted, and so for someone to get a report out of that system that gives
Right.
them a good sense of what's happening is sort of difficult. I mean, this report's almost a little easier because it's what was the cash balance at the beginning, what got contributed, what got spent, what got earned,
Right.
and that's it. But I've thought about would we does it make sense to for the trust funds or something almost download those into QuickBooks or something
Right.
and just be able to produce much easier reporting for folks to look at, because it's it is, I agree, very convoluted now. And I know it's frustrating when people say, I think Bill was looking for numbers at some point when I first got here,
Right.
and I looked at some of the numbers and just said, I'm honestly not super comfortable, like the reports I'm reading, I just hate to give you a number right
Right.
this second because I
Right.
just don't know,
Yep.
that they're accurate. But,
Right.
that's like everyone, we talk a lot about some summer projects, and that's
Sure.
one of them is just,
Right.
trying to make that easier.
Yep. Yeah, just an ability to more easily report to, the trustees or the stewards of some of these funds, like the Cemetery Committee, like Veterans Committee, so that there's sort of real-time understanding of what the balances are. And then a sort of further topic that Gary alluded to would be special conditions or restrictions that many of these trust funds have, and the extent to which Bartholomew and what they're doing is also taking those things into account. I don't
Yeah.
know the answer to that, but it's just a topic maybe for future discussion.
Yeah, and this will be my last point. I promise to keep it brief, but one of the other parts of this prudent investment rule is it allows us to also, if we can increase the earnings, for things like, Gary and I have talked about the perpetual care, the desire is to get to the perpetual care to the point where it's kicking off enough annual income that it can support the actual operating budget. This would help us to achieve that quicker. And then we also have the ability to, in the way this is set up now, you just sort of say, well, what was the interest earned? And that's what's available, for you this year. If you go to a more diversified portfolio that will have more of a total return kind of focus, we can do things where we can, like they talk about, like you can have policies where you take a 20-month average, so, roughly 5 years, and it helps you to sort of plan, because if you think about it, if you have the fund is going along great, and then suddenly we have a bad year, the return on the portfolio is down a year like 2022 or something like that, and suddenly you say, oh God, we've been getting $30,000 a year in income, and now we only have 18. This is a problem. You can build this sort of 20-month policy where you just take an average of your 20-month, kind of balances, and then that allows you to kind of absorb that one bad year and still make a $36,000 distribution to offset the budget. That's something we don't have right now that we would have under this prudent investor, which I think would be helpful with the objectives we have, specifically to the perpetual care fund, whatever. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
So we're going to discussion of Karen Anger's email to the select board dated 5/23/24 regarding areas of improvement for the select board brought up during her community outreach. So I saw two things here. send all the committee and boards the agenda for our meetings, right? And then the second thing is, we should have, like PowerPoint presentations of what the topics we're covering.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I've spent the last 6 weeks trying to make my way around town, meet with specific committee members, meet with elected officials, meet with police, fire. And one of the big topics that is coming up is just complete lack of communication they're feeling. And it has been echoed pretty recently, using the pride flag ceremony as a good example, as well as today. I think it would have been nice to be able to see some of the heads of finance committee attend while Jeff is speaking, should they be able to answer any questions that come from the select board. And one of the challenges that seems to be ongoing in the conversations is that they are either unaware, unprepared, or would have served as a resource to us in order to be able to make qualified responses to either some of the motions or some of the questions that come up. And I do believe just sending the agenda to them, I know that we've talked in the past, posting it is a good idea, but unfortunately in this day and age, I think a quick email, a quick touch point allows them to be able to put their minds together, put a plan in place. If they need to show up here, if they need to be able to have a reaction to something, I don't think it's hard to be able to just supply that with
It's easy
to
to
them.
do. We should do it.
Yeah.
Anyone disagree?
I agree. I think that is something that, would be an improvement to regularly ensure that, whether it's all department heads, maybe there's an easy way to, on a listserv or something, that basically anyone, including, in the example that was brought up, the chair of the Human Rights Commission, really, and perhaps even any member of any public board gets an email that just has the link to the agenda. And I'm not saying that we should wait until the new website from Civic Plus, the Civic Plus package, is in place, because that'll take some time. But I think that they offer some sort of alerts that people can sign up for, and maybe there's an alert that as soon as the agenda is posted, that whoever has signed up for getting that alert gets the alert, and they can, on their phone, they can, the agenda's in this for next week, and they just click on it.
And all it is Michelle has to expand the email.
Yeah, we sent it on Thursday.
Yeah, and I saw that, which was good.
Yeah, so I mean that.
No, I think it's great. It's a great first step. I think the communication in general is.
So I mean, we'll just continue that process, and we have the emails. And I think Ben alluded to it with the website. I think in a perfect world in the future, it will be a lot more than just board and committee members will have these alerts set up that, when these agendas go out, or they can have the ability to be granular in areas of interest. But when this stuff goes out, you'll get your text message and email, or however you're asking to be alerted, so it'll be more automated. But certainly in the interim, we can, continue just pushing it out. It's really not much more than 2 clicks of a button by adding your email list. And
So ironically, it seems like 2 clicks, but to be able to engage and communicate and be able to have their teams prepare is astronomically more of a touch point than 2 clicks. So if we can do it, that's great.
yeah, we'll just continue. So I
Great.
thought it was a good idea, so we did it last week, and we'll continue to do it.
Yeah, and the other feedback that we've received is that while people are trying to engage with the select board, whether it be on YouTube or whether it be in the room, we have to be able to provide them with what Jeff was doing today and what Michelle was able to put the information up. A lot of times there's touch points and presentations, or even specifically when the veterans came up, we didn't necessarily have the presentations up on screens, so people are unaware and unable to follow along. They're listening to dialogue, and that's fine, but in order to be able to properly give them the adequate information, we need to be able to present that. And whether or not, if there isn't something, maybe we put up a slide that says this is just, agenda and what's next. I think that there is some bit of a question from their standpoint of what is coming up when they don't see the agenda. So if we can mainstream that a little bit, that would be, I think, not only elevate our ability to to have our information out there, but I think it'll be able to help that.
So, we were talking about it earlier today. We used to do that.
Up until May of '23, the board decided as a group, or when there was a 3-member board, to move away from that platform to make it more conversational in looking at each other in the eyes. But
I don't think it's actually for us, though.
oh no, I'm not saying, but I'm saying that was the rationale at that
I'm
point.
happy for us to be able to talk and have a better, but it's more of the folks that are following along and want to be able to engage in a different way and be able to understand what's going on. We have some pretty big topics coming down the line, and to be able to have some information that is that they're able to communicate with. I think it all just falls into that communication and being transparent.
So prior select boards, as Steve was saying, Gary can attest to, I'm sure, they did have PowerPoint presentations, including the motions and the agenda item and so forth, so it was pretty extensive. It was moved away from last year before we were elected. Communication's definitely been an issue that's a repeated theme, and it certainly came up continuously throughout the master plan process as well. So there are strategic objectives in the plan that address communication. We did talk about it last year at our select board workshop, and one of the things that we had agreed to do this past year was to work on updating the communication plan, or I think we created it, but we sort of compiled everything that was being done and then started the process of adding to it. With the big project being taken on, of course, the website was sort of prioritized as the number one. But I think next week when we have our workshop, we'll come back to the communication issue again and sort of figure out what the priorities for this year should be to sort of take things to the next level. So I think it's an ongoing topic. Clearly, we still have a ways to go. But also, yeah, we have been paying attention, I think.
One thing that I've seen, and maybe others have seen this as well, that I think is pretty effective in this area is while a meeting is occurring, and I've seen this both in recorded meetings on usually YouTube of a municipal board meeting, as well as live, and I think this includes hybrid Zoom meetings, is that just up on the viewer's screen, there's at the bottom of the screen, it just says what the agenda item is that is being discussed. Mm-hmm. So it's not as elaborate as a PowerPoint where you're putting that up and so on. It's just, so the technology is there to do it. The Nantucket Conservation Commission, I know specifically does that because I represented them for a period of time and was involved in a lot of meetings with a lot of different agenda items, and you know, they'd have like 35 different order of conditions applications, and as they ticked through them, it would come up and say number 17, you know, 107 Main Street. So that, I think that's very effective, and I don't know if it's something that can be done through Zoom. I don't know whether HWCAM would have to be involved in that, but it's a pretty, at least from its appearance, it's a simple but helpful guide to where the board is in the meeting.
Yeah, we're going to look into something like that.
A little bit more technology will be there.
Yeah.
Right.
The last thing that I had left off the email that I wanted to make sure that we touch points is when my email started flowing, finally got up to speed, I started noticing that the emails were coming through that were being sent to the entire select board. Courtney was a good example today of how people are taking time out of their day to be able to put their thoughts in. They're trying to engage with us, and they're not receiving a response. And I think we have to put together a game plan starting next week. We can easily reach out to Courtney, one of us, or someone from the office, and acknowledge them. And I think that what's ending up happening is people, I'll use Courtney as an example, she had to come here today to get a very quick response of something that she could have received in an email that just said, hey, we're working on it, we acknowledge you, we hear you, we don't necessarily agree with some things, we're gonna work on other items, but we're not actually engaging with folks. So we're receiving multiple emails that say, haven't heard back from anybody, or no one's responding. And I do believe that there's a communication gap there.
So my mistake, when I forwarded her note to Margaret, Ann, and Dan, I should have said, somebody please respond to her.
I'm not actually finger pointing. I'm taking responsibility from all of us that we receive, one every couple days. And unfortunately, these folks are truly taking an effort to be engaged just as we are. And I don't believe that they're getting the response or the respect back from our team that just says, hey, we're acknowledging you, we're working on it. And I do believe that it's unfortunate. And Courtney is a good example of that today. And I would really like to be able to have the knowledge to say, hey, we're working as much as you had hoped that we are in order to be able to give you a response. And so
So I'm not debating with you.
Yeah.
But what I should have done is said, Margaret or Ann or Dan, can you please respond to her? Because it's their issue. It's a planning board issue.
And that's fine.
But I think-
But I
Would have been
think someone
informative.
need to say to Courtney, we're working on it. We hear you, we're working on it. And I think that is a miss from a public standpoint to hear. So we can add it to our discussion point next week. Happy to do that. I just wanted to make sure that we touch that.
I'm fine with that, responding. I was just going to give her a better response, like, oh, it's not select board, it's actually planning board. Oh, okay, I get it. Because Margaret responded to me,
Yeah.
which was wrong. And not even copied Ann or Dan. Go ahead, I think, Deirdre, were you going to say something?
Well, I think it's a good thing to add to the agenda for our workshop next week, because I think what we need is a protocol, because we can't reply all, because that's an OML violation, so we don't actually know what each other is doing or not doing. The staff weren't copied on most of those emails, so I think we just need to think through, is that we all 5 send acknowledgements? Is it designated to the chair or the vice chair or the clerk or someone, or the staff? Like, where does that acknowledgement lie? Or is it that all 5 of us send acknowledgements? I just think we need to think it through and understand what protocol we're going to use so that things don't fall through the cracks and people do get responses.
Yeah, certainly need the protocol, but I think part of it is just the long-term change from select boards that for decades worked on a 2-week cycle, and the response comes in somewhere around 14 days, or if it doesn't make that agenda, 28 days. Whereas nowadays, people, hey, where's my email? It's been 5 minutes, right? So we got to adjust our processes to have a new protocol, so at least there is the one response that said we acknowledge, right? That's what we
Right,
need.
because there's the acknowledgement and then there's the response to the issue, which probably needs to happen in open session, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to raise that issue because I completely agree that we should have a protocol on at least the initial response. And then if we're going to discuss this at our goals meeting, that'd be a good time to do it. But I think it does get trickier when it comes to the substance of the response, because just as one example, we all received an email, maybe even today, from 1 or 2 individuals who said, there's this amendment at the State House that's going to amend the MBTA communities law. It's a good thing for Wenham. Please urge your state legislators to bring the bill to the floor. So it's one thing to have a protocol that sends some initial response from Steve or Peter or someone saying, thank you, we received this. But we can't really promise that there's going to be a substantive response, because none of us knows how the others feel about that issue.
Right.
I think to your point, like, that just has to be, maybe the part of the protocol is, acknowledge your response, and the substance of it would have to be discussed in open session, and we'll let you know when it's on an agenda item or something like that.
And sometimes you get full of questions with their leading questions.
What's that?
Leading questions, and like they're trying to elicit an opinion. You know what I mean? So it's almost like an argumentative start of an argument. So the board has to be careful that you might not want to engage in a back and forth
Right.
email dispute that, again, it's all public record, so they could, then just go run it in the paper and not say it. You know what I mean? It's just, you want to be careful with.
Oh, I completely understand that and completely agree with you. I think what also, I was sitting in on a committee meeting, and one of the sentences was, I sent an email to the select board, no one except Peter responded. So this is how I feel. And I was a little taken aback because I thought about it. I should have said, yes, thank you. I thank you for your email. Let me think about it. I'll engage with you in a different way, or what Ben said. I can't speak for everybody under any circumstance, but there has to be some, they're taking the time out from their day to give us the issues. We need to be able to at least be respectful and acknowledge it.
I think we're all in violent
Yeah.
agreement on this.
Great. Well, thank you for reading my email.
Okay.
Thank you for sending it.
Thank you.
Oh, continued discussion on the select board's content policy, i.e. what content should be shared via the website, news, social media, flyers. So I went to our website, right? It's all town-related stuff.
Well, that's the general rule we try to follow right now is, and I kind of am the arbiter of that, is we try to just be town-sponsored, town-related business, not, we get emails quite frequently, of what appear to be great causes and, elder resources and things like that, but they're not, they're not the town of Wenham, and we're hesitant to put links on our website to organizations we have no association with, nor do we have any control as to what they, right? So at first glance, they might look appropriate, they're 501(c), but you don't know, you, by putting their link on the website, you're kind of endorsing the content when somebody goes and visits there, and you have no control over what. So generally, the rule, and through discussions over the last couple of years, the board has always seemed to err towards the side of, well, like the light board and website and social media is, really town business only. There's been some discussion that maybe that is changing, and we want to open it up to other things, right? There's 5K stuff all over the place. We have the patent homestead things going on down there. Just different events in town that they're not town related, but they have close ties to the town of Wenham and its residents. And so I guess I'm looking for some guidance from the board as to what direction you want to go, because council, as we discussed last time, their recommendation is always the most conservative one and the one that protects the town the most from liability, at least from their perspective, and that is to keep it town-only business. Like, they would be probably tighter than we are right now if they were to give you their opinion. They said, however, it is a policy decision for the executive board to make, which is the select board, and they will assist us in amending or drafting our policies to allow us to include other types of information. So I'm putting this out, not that we need an answer today, but I'm just putting it out before you to discuss. We can continue discussing, but I've been getting questions about why can't we put this out there? Why can't we put this out there? Hamilton does it, Ipswich does it. And it's true, a lot of towns do it. But it's kind of been the way where, ultimately it's your rule, it's your policy, and us as staff are just kind of enforcing those rules and making sure the town operates the way you want your town to operate. So just trying to do what the board wants, really.
A topic for the workshop?
Yeah, fine.
That's a good sentence. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Discussion on the select board's preferred practice regarding public comment outside the public comment period at the beginning of the meeting. So this is coming at me after that one meeting where Rick spoke about 7 times. That was 2 meetings ago, I think?
No, I think he only spoke twice, but a couple of people spoke multiple times. But
Well,
I don't think
wasn't-
it's on you. I just think, that we have to consider the pros and cons.
Can I ask where this came from?
Yeah, please.
No, that's my question. Where is this coming from? Was this an email that was sent to Steve?
No, this request is really from Peter. So Peter and I had a discussion
Okay,
at one
I
of our
wasn't aware if
routine.
someone sent an email asking about that. So
No, I think Peter received some feedback, that maybe he should be more restrictive on
I definitely-
people, people participating in the meeting. So my interpretation is that if the chair runs the meeting, so if the chair deems it appropriate that a member of the public can get out outside of public comment and make a comment, it's the chair's prerogative to allow that to happen. But Peter wanted to bring it in front of the board to kind of get some feedback. He was thinking, maybe once or twice to impose the 2-minute rule.
2-minute rule, twice is the max, stuff like that. But why don't we take it up?
Again, not a hard and fast rule, but just a general preference of the board. So when we're conducting a meeting that has, some significant participation and residents that really want to participate in commenting, that, the chairs know generally how the board feels and, how to proceed. So I think, again, not a hard and fast rule. It's up to the chair to, can adjust it on the fly. I think the only really hard and fast rule as far as public input is, the 10-minute maximum, 2-minute per person, not to exceed the 10 minutes.
At the beginning of the
Yes,
meeting.
and that's where, let's say, open discussion. They can bring anything up, say anything they want on the agenda or not, and the board doesn't deliberate, but you just listen.
With respect to the on the agenda or not part of that, my experience has been that often boards, and maybe this board historically has done this, I'm not sure, confine those comments to items that aren't otherwise on the agenda. And I think that I raised that point, I think, in the last meeting where I think some people wanted to speak during public input about the flag policy, but it was on the agenda, and we made them wait until we got to that item on the agenda. I don't know whether that's a rule of policy that we followed, if it's even a enforceable rule in general, but I've certainly, and probably a lot of you have seen that as well as kind of at least an informal rule. I've even seen on agendas where it says public input for items not otherwise on the agenda.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's the board's preference, and I think the intent there is, indicating that, if you have comment on something that's on the agenda, then you can have the chance to speak then. However, some boards have removed public comment entirely. You don't know, there is no public comment, period, at all, even during the discussion. Some boards will have similar to like Wenham, you have your discussion period where anybody can comment on anything on the agenda. Basically, you have 2 minutes, no restrictions, say, on the agenda, off the agenda, whatever you want to address the board at. And then some will, like you said, monitors it, things that are on the agenda, you'll have your chance to talk when we get to that point. So I think it's really just a board's preference how you want to do that.
Personally, I like that approach just from an organizational point of view, just to have all the comments, at the time of the agenda item, but that's just my personal preference. I wouldn't want to go.
Oh, yeah, totally up to the
over
board.
it.
I mean, some boards don't want, they just, like I said, public comment is the time when the public can address the board, and then the board basically just goes into business, like, it's like the school committee. They go into business mode and they conduct their business, and there's no input they discuss amongst themselves, they vote, they move on, there's no looking into the audience. It's just the way, again, I don't think it's right or wrong, it's whatever the board's preference is. And we can change and adopt however you want to do it.
But then a separate question, which we're going to, I think, defer until the goals meeting, is for public comment on agenda items, whether there should be a time limit or a number of times up to speak limit.
That's kind of what I just
Right.
mentioned.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So it's separate from the other thing that I brought up about public comment, but related, I guess.
All right, can we move on? Anything else?
Are we going to discuss this at the workshop also? Or did you want our input
not?
now?
Pardon?
Or do you want the input right now?
I'll take him. Let's do it now.
Yeah, fine.
It's been, you just said, I don't know, Gary and Karen?
Well, I think over the years, we've tried several different methodologies to address this. At one point, we went to a kind of double meeting so that a topic would come up on the agenda. There would be open comment from the public on that agenda item, but the board would not make any decisions at that meeting, but would wait for the next meeting to actually do the, our own discussion and vote. Otherwise, there is, as you say, you can have just the open session for whatever you want at the beginning, but then you can have kind of the mini open comments, perhaps at the beginning of each, item D. Anybody have a comment on item D before we start our own discussion? The only concerns there is that I think by open meeting law, you would have to make that a published process so that it does not seem like you're excluding people that didn't hear about it. So that we'd have to really change that and say, okay, on subject D, we're going to be discussing that tonight, and for the first 5 minutes, we will welcome public inputs on that. Because otherwise, I think you have to be careful that you pre-announce the opportunity for public comment, and also that you do not discriminate amongst those that heard about it and those that didn't hear about it, and also would have to have some sort of time limit. But I also see the issue for the chair is if we have the comments on a specific topic, then it falls to the chair to make sure those comments stay on that particular issue and don't wander, whereas you could have the open comments at the beginning. But it's a matter of, balance of, how much comment do we want? But I do think that, like the other night, the going back and forth or multiple visits to the podium causes problems because someone outside goes, well, wait a second, how come they got 3 chances at the podium at a period in the select board that was not open for public comment? And I think one way you can get around that is either to have official policy or to have people or organizations sign up to say, yes, we'd like to speak to the board on that agenda item, which would be a lot of administrative work, but I think it's something that we can talk about further.
I guess I'm a little confused about the rules around it because I don't disagree, it should be fair and so forth, but if it's on the agenda, that's sort of people's opportunity to come to the meeting and speak to it, whether we do it at the beginning or whether we do it in the middle. But I thought sort of the OML regs were more focused on the public comment period, and that within the meeting itself, it's at the discretion of the chair.
That's my understanding. And if we're going to pick it up, I can get more.
And check with KP.
Yeah, and get like a more official opinion on. My understanding is that the chair can invite, people to talk specifically about it. Each agenda item later on in the meeting.
If they're here to speak to an issue, right. And if we do go that route where it's at the discretion of the chair, I think like some guidelines are useful. I would say have it be 1 minute per person within the meeting, in the interest of sort of time and keeping it moving, and maybe twice at the microphone for a statement and a rebuttal, but not, because it can't be debate, right? We can't get into debate.
Yeah.
And it starts to stray into debate if it's too many times and too many comments. So that, I guess, would be my suggestion, 1 minute.
Yeah, a lot of this is relatively new struggle that the boards, like across the state, are, kind of dealing with, of trying to figure out how to deal with, because the recent there was a recent case, and I can't remember,
Southborough.
Southborough case where there was a civil rights violation for not, cutting somebody off because they didn't have restrictions. So now it's kind of like, now it's a thing, but nobody really knows where is, where are the boundaries? Like what
Yeah.
really is allowed, because it was a surprise. I think the verdict was a surprise to some people, so.
Yeah, so further input from KP would be helpful.
I think so too.
Yeah, so the only thing I would chime in and say is it was a little bit uncomfortable the other night with the engaging, as the select board was trying to have an open discussion and the continuous back and forth, even just standing at the podium was somewhat intimidating from
I frankly, I should have shut it down.
no, it
In
was,
retrospect.
it became intimidating to be able to then, turn to the colleagues here and have an open dialogue. So I actually would tend to go with what Ben is initiating. The idea of having an open conversation during the agenda items is, I think, exactly what we need. We don't have a lot of folks that want to participate in agenda items, and to be able to have that as an open option is great. To have them also be able to use the exact same topics at the front end of the meeting during the open dialogue, using 2 weeks ago as an example, we would have had a hot topic now for up to 10 minutes with multiple folks, to then have an agenda topic in half an hour, to then address it again, and then have open dialogue, and then have more speakers. It becomes a one issue meeting, and everything else is outweighed a little bit by that. So I do believe that if it is on the agenda, then we leave it to the agenda, and the open meeting in the front is really based on things that, whether they want to address an email or other agenda items that maybe not have made the actual official agenda. But I agree with Deidre, a minute is enough. And a rebuttal, because that's important to be able to allow that, but that's about it.
All right, we'll go get
All right.
some legal help.
Report back on Monday.
Okay. Discussion and potential vote on vacation carryover for town employees.
Steve?
Yeah, so this is the board, if you remember, 2 meetings ago, approved a 2-week carryover, limited of 2-week carryover maximum. So the sheet in the packet represents the individuals and their request to carry over. The personnel policy requires the select board approval, and the personnel policy also allows up to 2 weeks. So this is us, as staff, asking your approval to allow the carryover of the time identified in the packet.
Gary?
Do we include at the last meeting a statement that said we anticipate this is the last year for major carryovers, or?
Oh no, the last meeting was you permanently increased it from 1
Yeah.
week to 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
That was the case last year. A notification was sent out, however, it was met with significant resistance when it came time. So, we approached the board, and the board was amendable and graciously allowed 2 weeks instead of 1.
Very well.
And the carryover numbers that we're seeing on this list, some of those hours were carried over from prior years, is that right? Or?
Yeah, well, it all blends into one bank, so you can't exceed 2. So, like, if you have 3 weeks vacation,
Mm-hmm.
you can't exceed 5. Like, so you can't keep carrying over and banking.
Mm.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Right.
So, like, the next year, like, say you don't take any vacation that whole year, you got 5. Well, you're going to lose 3 because you're going to get 3 more on July 1. You can only carry over 2. So you got to take at least 3, or you're going to lose. You're in a use or lose it situation. So even the board, select board, unless you amend the policy, can't, I mean, COVID was, unique times, but it would be in conflict to the policy for the board to allow more than 2 weeks carryover.
Yeah, so it caps our liability.
Yes. Right, and that's designed to cap the financial liability on unplanned retirements or, taking a new job and people,
Getting
individuals
paid out,
sometimes
yeah.
having 10, 12, 15 weeks vacation for a long-term employee. And when you have a fixed budget, it can be very difficult to plan for.
Right.
So do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the carryover of hours for the town employees listed in the document in our packet at the number of hours listed for each employee.
Second?
Discussion? Vote. Peter says yes.
Deirdre, yes?
Ben, yes.
Karen, yes.
Gary, yes.
All right, unanimous?
All right, next item, discussion and potential vote to endorse grant application for community planning grant. I mean, kind of a no-brainer, right? So,
Yeah, do you want to say anything about it?
No, I think Peter probably can say more than I know about it. I just drafted that letter. We can amend it to include all the board signatures, or what, right now it just has Peter as the chair, so the board can vote to authorize Peter to sign on behalf, or we can amend it and do a sign now with all the select board's signatures. However,
I'm easy.
it has to go out in the mail. Margaret has reminded me a number of times, I believe by like 9 or 10 a.m. tomorrow. So it will have to be a quick turnaround.
Sounds like Peter's
It's all
sign.
yours.
Yeah, and my only comment is, chair, not chairperson.
Chair, not chairperson, okay?
Okay, that's it. So, move to approve the endorsement of the grant application for community planning grant.
Gary seconds.
Discussion? Vote.
Gary, yes.
Karen, yes.
Ben, yes.
Deirdre, yes?
Peter, yes.
Do we need to vote to authorize Peter, or that's fine?
Yeah, I guess be safe, authorize him. Yep,
Okay.
take another motion to authorize Peter to sign on behalf of the board.
I move to authorize Peter Clay as the chair to sign on behalf of the select board on the letter for the, referencing the community planning grant program.
Gary seconds.
Vote.
Gary, yes.
Karen, yes.
Ben, yes.
Deirdre, yes?
Peter, yes. Maybe I should abstain. I don't know. All right, let's talk about the town clerk job description. So I read it. It reads really well, except I think some group of you guys, you need to go back and proofread that thing, because there are mistakes in there.
Okay.
So, one, so like, we're talking about minutes, it says, select board, select small s, board, capital B. And then I just have a fundamental question. The clerk is responsible for all the minutes of all the boards and committees except for the select board?
Posting.
Posting them.
Posting.
Posting them to the website,
Oh,
Right.
okay.
not
So they
taking
can't-
the minutes.
Yeah, not taking them.
I'm sorry.
So I mean, it's the hope that,
Misinterpreted that.
Yeah.
right, that in their, day-to-day activities of posting the minutes, if they realize that a board hasn't sent their minutes in a year's time or something, that they could reach out and just be like, just a reminder. However, the clerk nor, other than the select board really has any authority to, force the board to produce the minutes, even though they're in conflict with the open meeting law.
I had one quick question that I didn't see in here, and we had during the conversation piece with Kirsten last meeting, a discussion of an assistant to the town clerk and where that fell, because from a managerial standpoint, I don't see it in here. So I know that that is not a position that's currently open, but in the past it has been. And there was conversation based on election and things like that of whether or not that would be used. But I would like to see some type of either managerial note in here that that person would report into the town clerk.
Well, we do have, there is reference to the temporary part-time,
Right.
which is the way it's always been. There's never been a permanent part-time person in the clerk's office. It's been a series of,
Maybe that's where I didn't see the actual,
yeah, so
It's under supervision
Town
exercised.
clerk as regular continued part of the job is accountable for the quality and quantity of work of occasional part-time employees, veteran or senior work-off volunteers, and election officers, and assures the accomplishments of the assigned work in the prescribed manner.
and in the event that we do hire somebody permanently in that role, would that also fall into that category?
Well, I mean, if we hired a permanent part-time, then we would amend the job description to probably to reflect that, would be
Can we just add
responsible.
it now? Is that
Well,
something that,
Well, not really, because,
No.
okay.
So you can't-
you know,
The
you're
job doesn't
supposing
exist.
a whole different organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Want to pass
Be
that down to
very-
the
Oh,
chair?
yeah.
Kirsten had just dropped that off when the door opened there.
So we have no edits? No, just a little wordsmithing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll prove it again. I'll pick that up.
So, do we have a motion to approve the town clerk job description amended by town administrator?
Edited,
Edited?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
not amended.
Not amended.
So moved.
Gary seconds.
All right, let's vote.
Gary, yes?
Karen, yes?
Ben, yes.
Deirdre, yes?
Peter, yes. Do you have a 5-minute website update?
Yeah, I can try to make it even quicker than that, which, the only update I have is that our town administrator, Steve Poulos, pulled a rabbit out of a hat in negotiations with Civic Plus over a tricky issue that I think we discussed at a prior meeting relating to a prior contract several administrations ago. And Steve was able to, and I don't mean to put all of the glory on Steve, because I think Joe and maybe Michelle were also involved in some of the brainstorming and conversations. But in any event, Steve was able to break the impasse on that issue in a manner that allows us to move forward, we hope, with Civic Plus, which was the preferred vendor that the task force had selected as our next website design company.
There you go.
Excellent.
All right, so that's great. Other matters, this may not have been anticipated by the chair.
Upcoming schedule?
Yeah. I didn't receive any vacation time, but I do have my vacation. It's the first week in August.
We'll try to survive for a week.
So,
Feel free to schedule without me.
August, if your shift is the second week available to you, because it's a long month, and we can work
Yeah, the
around
second week,
Labor
like,
Day
the-
anyhow, shift and still stay on a 2-week schedule.
Yeah, so I'll be gone part of like the 30th-ish through the 9th.
July 30th through August 9th.
Yeah.
Right.
Gary, I can't remember we were talking about this with you or whether it was Dana or Lara, but we need to put together the process by which we interact with the school and Hamilton and
The
Wenham.
master schedule, yes.
And just book that out, like, here's how that process works.
Does it make sense to, I'm just throwing this out there, to have a meeting in 2 weeks on June 18th, which I assume is probably in the plans already, but to not have,
June 18th?
Yeah, that's already planned.
is it? Okay, that's what I figured. I mean, that's
We don't know
two
whether
weeks from
it's-
tonight.
It's going to
2
be
weeks from today.
remote or,
Right, we could talk about
so we're
that.
going to do the plan was last week, we're going to do the summer planning this week.
Right,
And we're going to identify which meetings we're going to be.
yes.
Virtual and
Right.
in person.
But before we decide that, should we try to coalesce around the dates? So perhaps June 18th, which is 2 weeks from tonight. And then I'm suggesting that perhaps we do not meet 2 weeks after that, July 2nd, but instead we do the 9th and the 23rd, which would align, I think, with Steve's
July?
vacation. Yeah, because then we wouldn't meet on the 30th.
Whoops.
Are you, and you're back?
Yeah, so I'll be back. I'll be back, like, if we wanted to do the 13th and 27th of August. That would get 2 meetings in August. But then it would kind of mess us up for September.
Well,
'Cause September would start, the 1st would be the 3rd, so it'd be 1 week. Which is fine, if we could meet 2 weeks in a row, that's fine too.
yeah. Well, right, the
We could
3rd's the
take
day
a
after Labor Day.
Summer holiday and
Why
meet
couldn't-
once in August.
Why couldn't we do the
Or we
10th
could go
and
the 10th.
the 10th and the 24th?
Yeah, 10th and 24th.
Are you talking August?
Now we're in September, but
September.
Oh, we're in September now, I was looking at August. So
Oh,
what dates do we meet in August?
So it would be 6/18, 7/9, 7/23, 8/13, 8/27, 9/10, and 9/24.
Oh, okay,
right.
perfect.
So, yeah.
That works out well for me from a travel perspective.
7, 9, 7.
All right, so which remote?
Sorry,
The 27th of August.
8:13, 8:27, 9:10, 9:24. Right, and then did we discuss maybe just for the summer dates, maybe alternating all Zoom with in person? Is that?
Or we could do June in person and July and August on Zoom. That's also an opportunity, an option.
There's a lot
Too
going
much.
on. Yeah. I'd like to be able to have people have the opportunity to come in and speak and to engage more with us. But I'm all for putting the 23rd of July and the 27th of August, the last 2 of the month, on Zoom.
That works for me.
I think for my schedule,
Yeah.
if no one minds, I think I'd prefer that maybe if we make 7, 9, and 8:13 the Zooms, and then 7:23 and 8:27 would be in person. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So the first one of the month, July and August be Zoom,
Right.
right?
Yeah, and then I guess we don't need to make a decision about September, and probably September 10th would be better in person anyway. But we can experiment with those 2 dates, and that would, I guess that would mean 6/18 would be in person. Right.
Yes.
Because we're doing appointments, I think.
Well, we got to get the appointments next week, next meeting.
Right, that's what I mean. Yeah, to be here for that.
Do you
So
wanna take a
July
look at
9th?
October and November, since we're getting into holidays? As long as it's looking on now.
So
Sure.
July 9th, right?
Yep, July 9th would be
Zoom.
all Zoom. July 23rd would be in person with, like, I think as usual, Zoom availability for people. August 13th would be all Zoom. 8/27 would be normal. 9/10 would be normal.
Beyond that, if I might suggest, we better set fall town meeting date first, and back off from that as to what needs to get done.
That's true.
So maybe we just stop for
We
now with
stop and
9:24.
Talk about it at our workshop
When's
for
that
about
meeting?
10 minutes and get that
Fall.
done.
Yeah.
The fall time with the Rose Roger, do you remember?
Oh,
All right.
that was the end of September.
So Steve, we just said it'd be really good to be able to, during our workshop, carve out not only fall, but the spring dates as well.
Yeah, so well, to Gary's point, and I don't know if we'll have an answer then, but we're meeting with Lauren of KP Law, Roger Smurge, Kirsten's in on it, Joe, myself, to coordinate, because there's some blackout dates with the presidential election. So we're gonna come up with available dates around the Jewish holidays, the presidential election, and any other things we need to be aware of.
Next
Then-
Tuesday, the 11th.
Next Tuesday, the 11th, so it'll be one day after. And then we'll have a list of available dates that the select board can choose from. And we'll, obviously we'll make sure the venue is available on those dates, and then the select board can choose this fall town meeting date and then work backwards from there.
Just throwing this other, I'm traveling internationally the 27th of September into October 11th. So if we can mentally just take those days off the calendar. I won't be able to call in, I'll be. in-
So like no special town meeting?
Correct.
You said September.
Yeah.
So-
Let me pull it up. September 27th to October 11th.
All right, can we move on to minutes?
Minutes.
So I move to approve the OS minutes of 9/28/2023, wow, and 4/2/2024.
Second.
Discussion? Okay, let's vote.
Gary, yes?
Karen, abstain, I was not here.
Ben, yes.
Deirdre, yes.
Peter, yes. I move to approve and release the executive session minutes of 9/5/2023.
Second.
Vote.
Gary, yes?
Karen, abstain.
Ben, yes.
Deirdre, yes.
Peter, yes. All right, and who does the adjournment?
Clerk?
Okay, I will move to adjourn this meeting at approximately 8:23 p.m.
Second.
Second.
Gary?
Yes.
Karen?
Karen, yes.
Ben, yes.
Deirdre, yes.
Peter, yes.
Peter, I'll go up, make that edit. Chairperson to chair.
Yeah,
Bring
that's
it
it.
down, you can sign it.
Thank you.
It's no big